Joining me now is a best-selling author you may have heard of. She's got a regular segment here with Larry on the Larry O'Connor Show. It's a pretty sweet deal. Up-and-coming kid named Ann Coulter. How are you, Ann?
Fine, thanks. How are you, Derek Hunter?
I'm doing well. It's been a while since we've spoken, so I was excited to see that. Oh, good. I get to talk to Ann. And it's not going to be about immigration, although I suspect it might come up. I want to talk to you about your latest column.
Excellent.
On the Central Park 5. I've seen stories about this Netflix movie or documentary or whatever the hell it is, but I haven't watched it, and I all of a sudden saw this controversy blow up, and it's become an issue on the campaign. Everybody's going after the president because of what he did back in the late 80s. Tell everybody about what the Central Park 5 even is.
Well, they always do the so-and-so 5 to make them sound like political prisoners.
Right.
That's a recent appellation for the group. It was the Central Park rape in 1989. Really, really shocking, brutal rape. These young kids were running through the park one night, and it wasn't just the female jogger. They were beating up all kinds of people. Something they never even denied, but those sentences got vacated too. There was a public school teacher, John Laughlin, I believe he was done permanent damage. They whacked him with a lead pipe many times, and he was an ex-Marine. The policeman who took him to the hospital that night said it looked like you had dipped his head in a bucket of blood. So you have these teenagers running wild, and the most brutal rape and near murder was of an investment banker, whom I insist on referring to as the Jogger, although she has come out. But the way they're going after the prosecutors and the cops in this case, I think she's going to be the next one they're going to accuse of white supremacy for being the victim of this brutal crime. She was beaten so badly, her case was initially assigned to the homicide unit of the New York DA. None of her doctors thought she'd make it through the night. They waylaid her, dragged her into the woods, beat her. She lost 3/4 of her blood. Her eye was out of her eye. When the police showed up, they didn't know if it was a man or a woman. They just saw this person moaning. They heard the moaning from the mud. And what confuses people, I will say quickly, because I've written about it quite a bit, is there was no DNA evidence connecting the 5 who confessed to the crime. But back then in 1989, this is like saying, the cops didn't use their iPhones to find her. DNA testing was so brand new, and it had only been used in any criminal case anywhere in the United States 1 year before. It was somewhat questionable whether it could be introduced in a New York.
It was still considered new technology a few years later in the O.J. trial that confused the jury.
So crime scene investigators weren't trying to preserve DNA evidence. That doesn't mean that no crimes were solved before 2001. That's when it really got to be very good and used quite regularly. And so most people feel like, well, if you don't have DNA, you don't have a case these days. But there were lots of crimes that were solved before 2001. Among them, the preppy murder case. That guy who killed Jennifer Levins, Robert Chambers, I think it was, met her at Dorian's Hands. They went for a walk, and he said it was rough sex, but he ended up choking her, and she died. How did they get that case? The New York City police are very, very good. If you want to commit a murder, do it in Greenwich, Connecticut, or Boulder, Colorado. If you want to be a murder victim, definitely do it in New York, because the New York cops will get you.
But, Ann, how did these guys go from rapists and horrible people to now a cause celeb at the moment of the left?
They waited 13 years. I have a chapter on this in my book about mobs, demonic. The left just really loves, they want courts to decide our immigration, abortion, and war policy, but they do not want courts deciding criminal cases. And I think it is to run down any sort of sense that courts get it right. The phony claim that innocent men have been put to death in this country. There's no evidence that an innocent man has been put to death in America in more than half a century. And it's hard to go back before that just because it's hard to get the records. But I think that's what leads the left to do it. It started with that Sarah Burns documentary. I should say, 13 years later, also the confessions. You have to remember, when they were confessing, the cops didn't know, they didn't know, the prosecutors didn't know. If the jogger would wake up from her coma, she was in a coma for about a month, wake up from her coma and say, my boyfriend did it. So, they're not going to be coercing confessions out of people who didn't do it. The 5 boys confessed on videotape in the presence of their parents, some of whom were really lovely and showed up at the police station and said, tell the truth and take the consequences. They knew facts about the crime that only someone at the crime would have known. That was this week's column. Last week's column was to point out that the alleged evidence exonerating them is BS. This week was the evidence presented at trial. They told not only the cops, but they told a lot of their friends about it. And those friends came and testified that one of the Central Park rapists, said to them, that girl who was raped in the park last night, that was us. That sort of thing. The confessions were attacked in a 6-week pre-hearing by the judge, ruled on. 2 multi-ethnic juries heard the case with, cross-examination. This is how we decide cases in America. And then liberals just lie in wait for 13 years. Their convictions upheld on appeal. Liberals lie in wait and decide, no, we, a very, very un-multi-ethnic group, reporters, editors, an aging DA, we're just going to declare them innocent and start making fictional movies to persuade people that they're innocent.
It's good work if you can get it, I guess.
No, it really is outrageous.
It is.
3 columns back, I was talking about how we're just living in a land of fairy tales. We've gone from the Anglo-Saxon method of the battle of 2 sides, and this is how criminal defense lawyers defend what they do for a living, getting guilty people off. No, you got to prove your case. We're going to go in and fight in court, and there will be judges ruling on it. We're going to present facts and evidence, and it has to be good evidence that's admissible in a court. No, now we're just going to the African folktale method of deciding cases. Oh, we'll just tell a little story and put it on Netflix.
Yeah, well, the column is Who Are You Going to Believe, Netflix or the Evidence? And Coulter, I want to ask you, just to get your thoughts. I imagine you have a couple on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's use of the term concentration camps down on the southern border. Have you gone to visit the modern Dachau down there in El Paso?
I think, although I am generally against, lawsuits, tort lawsuits, but I think she can sue the school she went to for not providing her with a proper education. I mean, this is just an extension of, I'm a hate watcher. I love to watch MSNBC. Even I can't take this anymore. It's just who can come up with the more vile term to describe Donald Trump. And, oh, yes, Hitler and Nazism gets thrown around quite a bit.
It's 25% of the programming on MSNBC. Another 25% is clips from Fox, and then the rest is Stephanie Ruhle drooling on herself.
I mean, the one thing I do have high hopes for getting accomplished in the Trump administration besides, and yay, today, as I tweeted out, you would not think of all the campaign promises somebody could make. I won't get us involved in any pointless wars. You wouldn't think that would be a heavy lift. But it is. Oh, my gosh. Presidential candidates are always promising we're not going to get in wars. That was Obama promised it. Yeah, he pulled out troops precipitously from Iraq, but he sent loads of troops into the utterly pointless killing fields of Afghanistan.
And he bombed the hell out of Libya, which really did nothing.
Right. No, but you can go back president after president. They run on saying, oh, all these other wars are pointless. Don't worry, I won't get us into war. And, of course, Donald Trump did very famously. But I will say it's a tougher promise to keep. I won't get us involved in any pointless wars than you would think. So my hat's off to Trump. He kept the campaign promise today. Now that he's on a roll, I think there are some other promises he could keep, like building the wall and a few other things.
And we're up against it. Can you hang on? Could you hang on through the break?
Absolutely.
All right, because we're just going to have to get into this a little bit deeper. I was going to say, we're not going to talk that much about immigration with Ann Coulter, but we have to. We have to. But first, we have to step into the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center and get the latest update on the hellish road conditions from Ed Rodriguez.
That's okay. I'm making Ann Coulter wait. I feel pretty big.
We are back on the Larry O'Connor Show. I'm Derek Hunter, sitting in for vacationing Larry. Will be back on Monday, and we're talking with Ann Coulter. And damn, I just looked you up, Ann. Look at some of your latest tweets. You've got over 2 million followers now on Twitter.
Want to know something interesting?
No. Yes, of course I do.
For 6 months, I have not gotten one new follower.
Really?
Now, I'm thinking that has something to do with Twitter.
Well, you're up to 2.14 million people there.
Yeah, same as I was last October. Isn't that suspicious to you?
Well, I've been sitting at 51,008 for about 2 months. It's weird. There might be some. Maybe we're shadow banned. We should join in that AOC class action lawsuit against her education and maybe try and.
That's right. That's right.
But I want to talk to you about the situation down on the southern border. You have been a vociferous critic of the president and the broken promise.
And you notice how I subtly moved the conversation around to that?
I noticed. I was trying to avoid it, but I could not. Could not. So I want to talk to you about this because we are entering re-election season. God, it feels dirty to say that this early, but we are. Are you seeing anything you're happy about down on the southern border?
In terms of action, no. But, boy, I mean, Trump... He says the right things, and this is why I supported him pedal to the metal in 2016 from the moment he came down the escalator. Nobody else was even saying it. I told no one about this, but since someone else reported it, I will say. The reason I got in a Tourette'sing shouting match with the president, I don't know, I guess it was his first year in office, was because I said, you're governing like Jeb exclamation point would. So
that's below the belt,
Ann. He took that as the insult it was.
Right.
So, I mean, my point is the rest of them are all promising to take us to hell right away. We are not stopping for gas. You cannot go to the bathroom. It is going to be just straight to hell. Whereas Trump was at least promising to take us in the opposite direction of hell. What it's turning out is that, sometimes we're going toward hell, sometimes away from hell, sometimes this is crazy detour. You never know where you're ending up. But he still says the right things. I'll give him that, and nobody else. I mean, it would be so easy for Democrats to come up and say, look, he's not keeping his promises. We, the Democratic Party, care about the working class of America. We will actually build a wall. But that has just been so anathematized. The idea that America should have a border is treated as some sort of Nazi idea.
Well, everything is Nazi now. It doesn't even matter what it is. If a Republican does it, not even just Trump, it's Nazi.
But there are easy things that could be done. For example, I just tweeted, and I shouldn't complain when people are trying to do something, I guess. But the governor of Texas is sending 1,000 National Guard troops to the border. Well, okay, that sounds great. You want to say great?
Yeah, but if they're standing on the U.S. side with fruit baskets for everybody, it's not really all that helpful.
It is counterproductive. How about putting them right on the borderline and don't let them step in 1 inch into the U.S.? Then we don't have to take them. It's only when they step on U.S. soil.
The world's worst game of Red Rover.
Exactly. Or why doesn't the president send our troops, 5 yards into Mexico? Build the wall there. I mean, we were all just debating. We're so proud of the president for not bombing 150 Iranians. No one seems to have a problem with the president unilaterally bombing foreigners in the Middle East. No, well, of course, that's part of his job. He's commander-in-chief. But how about sending troops a few yards into the country on our border and just stopping it? And, of course, the easiest thing to do is for him to do, everybody forgets what I fondly refer to as the Muslim ban that wasn't a Muslim ban. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. Very clear, strong opinion. The president can, in the national interest, ban any group of immigrants. He could ban any immigrants from Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico, so on and so forth.
But that won't stop them from being able to claim asylum. Are you? Last thing, we got 30 seconds here.
Yes, it does.
It can? Well, that'll be in court in about 30 seconds. But I want to ask you your thoughts on the deal we cut with Mexico to have them, at least ostensibly, police their southern border a little better.
I think my ideas are a lot more effective.
A series of trebuchets in a trench.
And they are in the president's, that's in his job description. That was one of the brilliant things about his campaign that I wrote about in Trump We Trust. People would say, oh, he's not going to do this, oh, he can't do this. Other than repealing Obamacare, every major promise Trump made is 100% the responsibility of the President of the United States. He does not need Congress.
Yeah, I wish he would declassify all the stuff related to the Mueller. There are a lot of things he could do unilaterally.
Let's save
I know that, but there are things that he says, oh, we should do this, we should do that. I don't know.
And then doesn't do them.
Maybe somebody needs to whisper.
That's becoming kind of a problem pattern.
Ann Coulter, any one of her books you buy is a great read, and her columns, as always. Thank you, Ann.
Good to talk to you, Derek. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Washington's Mall, WMAL, where Washington comes to talk.
Innovation doesn't always mean adding blades. So Gillette